The moment a billionaire watched his maid's gentle hands awaken his silent son's soul, his own heart roared back to life. David Hartley had built an empire worth $12 billion, but watching a woman in a cleaning apron teach his autistic son to rebuild a motorcycle engine with more patience than he'd ever shown, that was the moment his carefully constructed world began to crumble. If this is your first time here, welcome to our family of storytellers. Please introduce yourself in the comments below. Tell us where you're watching from. What do you think makes a person truly valuable? Share your thoughts below. Now stay with me through this heartwarming story. David Hartley had built an empire worth $12 billion, but watching a woman in a cleaning apron teach his autistic son to rebuild a motorcycle engine with more patience than he'd ever shown, that was the moment his carefully constructed world began to crumble. But that moment was still 3 hours away. Right now, David sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor of Hartley Financial, his manicured fingers dancing across a keyboard worth more than most people's cars. The Seattle skyline stretched before him through floor-to-ceiling windows, but he saw only numbers, profit margins, acquisition targets, quarterly projections. His phone buzzed, a text from his assistant. "Tommy had another episode this morning. The nanny quit, again." David's jaw tightened. The fourth nanny in 6 months. Tommy, his 7-year-old son, wasn't just challenging, he was expensive. Special schools, therapists, behavioral specialists, and now a revolving door of caregivers who promised they understood autism, but fled the moment Tommy had a meltdown over the wrong color of cereal bowl. David typed back, "Find another one, double the salary if needed." But even as he sent it, a familiar ache settled in his chest. He loved Tommy. God, he loved that boy. But loving and understanding were two different things. Tommy spoke in mechanical terms and obsessed over engines. He couldn't handle crowds, loud noises, or changes in routine. David's world of board meetings, charity galas, and business dinners might as well have been Mars to his son. The intercom crackled. "Mr. Hartley, your 3 o'clock is here." "Send them in." But his mind wasn't on the merger. It was on Tommy, probably at home right now, lining up his toy motorcycles in perfect rows, humming engine sounds, while some new stranger tried to figure out why he wouldn't eat lunch. Meanwhile, in the Hartley Mansion's service entrance, Maya Washington pulled her dented Honda into the staff parking area, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. At 28, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible. Her dark eyes held intelligence she'd learned to hide, her calloused hands proof of skills she couldn't afford to advertise. The Hartley house loomed before her, all glass and steel angles, like its owner. She'd been cleaning here for 3 months, and Mr. Hartley had spoken to her exactly 4 times, always polite, always distant. She preferred it that way. But Tommy was different. Maya grabbed her cleaning supplies and headed to the side entrance. Through the kitchen window, she could see him, a small boy with sandy hair, sitting cross-legged on the floor, completely absorbed in taking apart a remote-control car with precision like a surgeon. "Good morning, Tommy," she said softly as she entered. He didn't look up, but his humming changed pitch, his way of acknowledging her. Maya had learned Tommy's language over the months. She knew that high-pitched hum meant he was happy, that he always counted his toy motorcycles in sets of 7, and that sudden changes made him shut down completely. "Mrs. Patterson quit," he said matter-of-factly, still focused on his work. "She said I was too much trouble." Maya's heart clenched. She set down her supplies and crouched beside him. "Mrs. Patterson didn't understand engines like you do. That's her loss, not yours." For the first time, Tommy looked at her. His eyes, his father's eyes, were bright with unshed tears. "Daddy says I'm expensive." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd heard David on phone calls talking about Tommy like he was a problem to be managed rather than a child to be cherished. It made her sick. "You know what I think?" Maya sat cross-legged beside him, matching his position. "I think you're not expensive, you're precious. There's a difference." Tommy considered this with the seriousness only children possess. "What's the difference?" "Expensive means it costs a lot of money. Precious means it's worth everything." A small smile tugged at Tommy's lips, the first genuine smile Maya had seen from him all week. "Maya," his voice was barely a whisper, "do you know about motorcycles, real ones?" She glanced toward the front of the house where David's home office was, then back to Tommy's hopeful face. What she was about to say could get her fired. But looking at this precious, brilliant, lonely boy who spoke in engine parts and dreamed in horsepower, she said, "I know a little," she said carefully. "Why?" "There's a broken one in the garage. Daddy says it's junk, but I think it just needs someone who understands it." Maya's pulse quickened. She knew that motorcycle, a vintage Harley-Davidson that David had bought on impulse and abandoned when it wouldn't start. She'd seen it gathering dust for months, and her fingers had literally itched to get under its hood. Would you want to look at it together?" Tommy asked, his voice small and hopeful. Maya looked at this precious boy, expensive to his father, but priceless to her heart, and made a decision that would change everything. "Yeah, Tommy, let's go see what we can figure out." The garage smelled of motor oil and abandonment. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through high windows and settling on David's collection of impulse purchases, a jet ski he'd used twice, exercise equipment that doubled as expensive coat racks, and in the far corner, the motorcycle. Maya's breath caught when she saw it properly for the first time. A 1987 Harley-Davidson Sportster, its chrome dulled, but its bones still beautiful. This wasn't junk. This was a classic that had been loved once, ridden hard, and then forgotten. "She's gorgeous," Maya whispered, running her fingers along the tank. Tommy's eyes lit up. "She?" "Motorcycles are always she," Maya explained, crouching down to Tommy's level, "because they're temperamental, powerful, and beautiful all at once, just like the strongest women you'll ever meet." She pulled out her phone and showed Tommy pictures she'd saved, herself at 19, covered in grease, grinning beside a rebuilt Triumph she'd spent 6 months restoring. Her father's garage, where she learned that engines had personalities and problems had solutions if you just listened carefully enough. "You did that?" Tommy's voice was filled with wonder. "I used to fix bikes for a living. Before." She trailed off. Before the economy crashed. Before her father's garage went under. Before she had to choose between pride and survival. Tommy studied the Harley with new intensity. "What's wrong with her?" Maya copped the seat and peered to the engine compartment. Her trained eye cataloged the issues immediately. Corroded battery terminals, old fuel in the lines, spark plugs that hadn't been changed in years. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that couldn't be fixed with patience and the right touch. "She's been sleeping too long," Maya said. "Her blood isn't flowing right." "Blood?" "Fuel, oil, the stuff that keeps her heart beating." Maya pointed to different components, using the mechanical metaphors Tommy understood. "See this? This is like her lungs, the air filter. It's all clogged up. And these," she touched the spark plugs, "these are like her brain cells. They help her think fast enough to run." Tommy nodded seriously, absorbing every word. "Can we wake her up?" Maya glanced toward the house. David wouldn't be home for hours. And Tommy needed this, needed to feel capable, needed to understand that broken things could be made whole again. We can try, but it's going to take time, and we have to be very careful. Motorcycles demand respect. For the next 2 hours, Maya guided Tommy through the basics. She showed him how to check fluid levels, how to clean battery terminals with baking soda and an old toothbrush, and how to listen to an engine's whispers. Tommy's hands shook with excitement as he helped remove the old spark plugs, counting each turn of the wrench. 17 turns, he announced proudly. Perfect count, Tommy. You're a natural. This is what Maya had missed most. Not just the mechanical work, but the teaching. Watching someone discover they could fix what seemed broken. Her father had given her this gift, and now she was passing it on. Tommy was deep in concentration. The dismissal hit Maya like a slap. Ms. Washington. Not Maya, not the woman who'd just spent 2 hours unlocking his son's potential. The maid who'd overstepped her bounds. Tommy looked between them, confusion clouding his features. But Maya said we could try to start her tomorrow. The motorcycle. She said, "I'm sure Ms. Washington has many responsibilities," David cut him off. Real responsibilities. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. She began gathering the tools with shaking hands, each clang of metal against metal unnaturally loud in the sudden tension. "Tommy, go inside, now." Tommy's shoulders sagged, but he obeyed. At the garage door, he turned back. "Maya, will you still help me understand engines?" Before Maya could answer, David stepped between them. "That won't be necessary. I'll arrange for proper instruction, professional instruction." The word professional hung in the air like an accusation. Maya understood perfectly. Not the maid, not the help, professional. Tommy disappeared into the house, and the silence that followed felt suffocating. David turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Ms. Washington?" "Mr. Hartley." Maya's voice came out steady despite the tremor in her hands. "That was—" He stopped, ran his hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. "Tommy's never shown interest in mechanical things before." Maya said nothing. What could she say? That his son was brilliant? That Tommy had absorbed more about engines in 2 hours than most people learned in weeks? That maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't Tommy, but everyone else's inability to speak his language? "Where did you learn about motorcycles?" The question sounded reluctant, like he didn't want to ask but couldn't help himself. "My father owned a garage." Maya answers short, professional, safe. "And you worked there?" "Until it closed." David nodded slowly, processing this information. Maya watched him struggle with something. Curiosity warring with preconceptions. Fascination battling with social conditioning. "Mr. Hartley," Maya said carefully, "I apologize if I overstepped. Tommy asked questions and I—" "Don't." The word came out sharper than he'd intended. "Don't apologize for—" He gestured helplessly at the motorcycle, the tools, the lingering magic of the afternoon. "For whatever that was." But even as he said it, Maya could see him retreating. His shoulders straightened, his expression grew distant, the walls were going back up, brick by brick. "It won't happen again," Maya said quietly. Something flickered across David's face. Disappointment? Relief? "Good. That's probably best." Maya nodded and headed for the door, but David's voice stopped her. "Ms. Washington?" She turned. Tommy seemed happy. I haven't seen him that excited about anything in months. The admission cost him something. Maya could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way he looked anywhere but directly at her. "He's a special boy, Mr. Hartley. He just needs people who understand his language. And you understand it? I understand being dismissed because people think they know what you're worth before they know who you are." The words hit their mark. David's face flushed and he looked away. "I'll finish the house cleaning," Maya said. "Then I'll go." She was halfway to the door when David called out again. The motorcycle. Could it actually run again? Maya paused. With the right parts and enough patience, she'd purr like a kitten. How much would that cost? Money? Maybe $300. Time and care? Maya shrugged. Priceless. Inside the house, 20 minutes later. Maya moved through her cleaning routine on autopilot, but her mind was in turmoil. She'd crossed a line today, not just professionally, but personally. For 2 hours she'd let herself imagine what it would be like to use her real skills again, to teach, to build something meaningful. And for a moment, just a moment, she'd seen something in David Hartley's eyes that had nothing to do with employer and employee, something that made her pulse race and her defenses crumble. Dangerous territory. Maya Washington couldn't afford to fall for her billionaire boss. She couldn't afford to see him as anything other than a paycheck. Not when she was one missed payment away from losing her tiny apartment, not when she was still rebuilding her life from nothing. She'd worked for wealthy men before. She knew how this story ended, with the help being reminded of their place, usually in the most humiliating way possible. From upstairs, she could hear Tommy's voice, high and excited, telling his father about compression ratios and fuel injection systems. David's responses were patient but stilted, like he was speaking a foreign language he'd only just learned. Maya's heart ached for them both. Tommy, desperate for connection with his father. David, wanting to bridge the gap but not knowing how. But it wasn't her problem to solve. Couldn't be. She finished the living room and moved to David's home office. The walls were covered with awards, degrees, photos of David shaking hands with politicians and celebrities, a shrine to success and social status. On his desk, mixed in with financial reports and merger documents, she spotted something that made her breath catch, a printout of motorcycle repair manuals, classic Harley restoration guides. He'd been researching. Maya stared at the papers, her heart hammering. This changed nothing, she told herself. So what if he'd looked up how to fix his own motorcycle? It didn't mean anything. But as she dusted around the papers, careful not to disturb them, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed this afternoon, that the careful distance she'd maintained for 3 months had been shattered by a shared moment over spark plugs and dreams. From the kitchen, she heard David's voice, low and uncertain. "Tommy, about the motorcycle lessons. Maybe we could continue them. Just the two of us." "But Maya knows more than you do, Daddy. She said engines have personalities, and you have to listen to what they're telling you." A long pause. Maybe Maya could teach us both if she wants to. The smart thing would be to say no, to maintain professional boundaries, to protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of wanting something, someone she could never have. But as Tommy's delighted laughter drifted down from upstairs, Maya found herself imagining tomorrow afternoon in that garage, oil under her nails again, teaching both father and son the language of engines and hope. "We're halfway through this incredible journey. What do you think Maya should do? Should she risk her heart and her job for a chance at something real? Share your thoughts in the comments. Are you team play it safe or team take the leap? Let us know where you're watching from. Maya was loading her cleaning supplies into her Honda when she heard the scream. Not Tommy's usual overwhelmed cry. This was different. Raw terror mixed with physical pain. She dropped her bucket and ran toward the house, her heart slamming against her ribs. She found them in the kitchen. Tommy was on the floor, his small body rigid with panic, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. Broken glass from a water pitcher sparkled around him like deadly confetti. David knelt beside his son, his expensive shirt already stained red, his face pale with fear. "I don't know what happened," David said frantically as Maya burst through the door. "He was helping me get water, and the pitcher just slipped, and the sound of it breaking, he just collapsed and started screaming." Tommy's screams had dissolved into the rhythmic keening Maya recognized as a full meltdown. His eyes were squeezed shut, his hands pressed so hard against his ears that his knuckles had gone white. Blood continued to trickle down his face from where a shard had caught him. "Don't touch him," Maya said sharply when David reached for Tommy again. "Not when he's like this. Physical contact will make it worse." David's hands hovered helplessly in the air. "But he's bleeding." "I know, but if you grab him now, he'll fight like his life depends on it." Maya knelt just outside Tommy's personal space, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Tommy, can you hear my voice?" The keening continued, but she caught the slight change in pitch that meant he was listening. "You're safe, sweetheart. The loud sound is gone. It's just us now." Maya began humming, the same tune Tommy hummed when he worked on his toy motorcycles, low, steady, predictable. David watched in amazement as Tommy's rigid posture began to relax slightly. "The blood," David whispered urgently. "Shouldn't we—" "No," Maya murmured back, never taking her eyes off Tommy. "Head wounds bleed a lot, but it's not deep. Right now we have to get him regulated before we can treat anything else." She continued humming, adding hand gestures Tommy could see through his peripheral vision, the same methodical movements she used when demonstrating engine repair, something familiar and soothing. Gradually, Tommy's cries softened to whimpers, then to a shaky breathing. "Maya?" he voiced small and broken. "I'm here, baby. You're okay. The loud sound startled you, didn't it?" Tommy nodded against the floor, his eyes still squeezed shut. "Too loud, too sharp, made my brain feel broken." "Your brain isn't broken. It just processes sounds differently, more intensely. That's actually a superpower, even though it doesn't always feel like one." David looked between them, completely out of his depth. This woman, his maid, understood his son's neurological responses better than he did, better than the parade of specialists he'd hired. "Can you sit up now?" Maya asked gently. Tommy slowly pushed himself upright, finally opening his eyes. The cut on his forehead had mostly stopped bleeding, but he looked fragile, younger than his 7 years. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I dropped your pitcher. I made a mess." The words broke something inside David's chest. "Tommy, no! You didn't do anything wrong. Accidents happen." But Tommy was already withdrawing again, that familiar shame clouding his features. Maya saw it too, and acted quickly. "Tommy, remember what we talked about earlier, about how motorcycles sometimes make loud, scary sounds when something's wrong?" Tommy nodded hesitantly. "Well, people are like that too. Sometimes our bodies make sounds or movements we can't control when we're overwhelmed. It doesn't mean we're broken, it means we're human. But normal kids don't. Normal is overrated. You know what I think? I think the world needs more people who notice when something sounds wrong, who pay attention to details others miss. That's exactly the kind of person you want working on your motorcycle." A tiny smile tugged at Tommy's lips. "Really?" "Really. Now, let's get that cut cleaned up, and then maybe your dad can help us figure out what we need to get that Harley running." David started. "I'm sorry, what?" Maya looked up at him, challenge in her dark eyes. "You said maybe we could continue the lessons, all 3 of us." David glanced around the destroyed kitchen, blood on his shirt, glass on the floor, his son still trembling from sensory overload. Any employee would have called 911, waited for paramedics, maintained professional distance. But Maya knew exactly what to do. Had talked Tommy down from a full meltdown using nothing but patience and understanding. Had made his son smile again within minutes of a traumatic accident. "You really think the 3 of us could—" "Daddy!" Tommy interrupted, his excitement returning despite his bandage Maya was now applying to his forehead. Maya found the problem with the bike. She said with new parts and patience, she'd purr like a kitten. A motorcycle purring like a kitten, David mused, looking directly at Maya. That's an interesting contradiction. The best things usually are, Maya replied, her hands gentle on Tommy's wound. David made a decision that surprised him. Okay, tomorrow after school, we'll work on the motorcycle, all three of us. Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? You promise? I promise. David looked at Maya over his son's head. But Miss Washington is in charge. She's the expert. Something passed between them in that moment. Acknowledgement, respect, the beginning of trust. Maya felt the walls she'd built around her heart start to crack. There's just one condition, David added, now his voice softer. If we're going to be working together every day, you should probably call me David. Maya's pulse stuttered. Mr. Hartley, I don't think... David, he repeated firmly. Partners should be on first-name basis, don't you think? The word partners hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Tommy looked back and forth between the adults, grinning despite his injury. This is the best day ever! Laughter broke out of Maya, not that careful, professional responses she had perfected. Only you would think getting hurt and bleeding all over the kitchen counts as the best day ever. Not that part, Tommy said seriously. The part where you and Daddy are going to teach me about motorcycles together, like a real family. The words hit both adults like lightning. Maya's breath caught, and David went very still. Like a real family. Tommy, oblivious to the bombshell he had just dropped, was already planning their next session. Can we start with the carburetor? Maya showed me pictures, and I think I understand how it breathes. But Maya and David were no longer listening to his chatter. They were looking at each other across Tommy's head, both thinking the same dangerous thought. What if? The next afternoon, Maya arrived at the Hartley mansion with more than just cleaning supplies. Hidden in her trunk were tools she hadn't touched in 3 years. Her father's socket wrench set, still in its worn leather case, and a compression gauge that had been her 18th birthday present. She had spent the night wrestling with doubt. This was dangerous territory, letting David see her real skills, her real self. But Tommy's words echoed in her mind. Like a real family. When she found them in the garage, David was already there, having traded his business suit for jeans and a t-shirt that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Tommy sat cross-legged beside the Harley, organizing bolts by size with the methodical precision that calmed his anxious mind. "Maya!" Tommy jumped up, his bandaged forehead making him look like a tiny warrior. "Daddy brought new spark plugs and oil, and he said we can order whatever parts we need." David held up a shopping bag from the motorcycle dealership, looking slightly embarrassed. "I may have gone overboard." The guy at the shop was very thorough in his recommendations. Maya peered into the bag and couldn't suppress a smile. Premium oil, top-of-the-line spark plugs, even a new air filter still in its packaging. You bought enough supplies to rebuild the entire engine. Is that bad? No, Maya said softly, touched by the gesture. It's perfect. Shows respect for the machine. As they worked, Maya found herself relaxing into the rhythm she'd missed desperately. Tommy proved to be a natural student, his attention to detail making him perfect for the precise work of engine repair. David was more hesitant, clearly afraid of breaking something expensive, but he listened intently to every explanation. "Okay, Tommy, see if you can tell me what's different about this spark plug," Maya said, handing him one of the old ones they'd removed. Tommy held it up to the light, examining it with scientific intensity. "The metal part is all black and crusty, like it's been cooking something for too long." "Exactly. That's carbon buildup. It happens when—" "Maya?" David's voice was thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up from the carburetor she was cleaning. "Sure. Where did you really learn all this? I mean, I've seen professional mechanics who don't explain things as clearly as you do." Maya's hand stilled on the wrench. This was the moment she'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "My dad," she said simply. "Jackson Washington. He owned Washington Auto and Cycle on Rainier Avenue for 32 years. "Washington Auto," David repeated slowly. "I remember that place. My father used to take our cars there when I was a kid. Said Jack Washington was the only mechanic in Seattle he trusted completely." Maya's head snapped up. "You knew my dad?" "Not well, but yeah. He fixed my first car when I was 16, a beat-up Honda Civic I'd bought with lawn mowing money. He could have charged me anything, taken advantage of a kid who didn't know better. Instead, he spent 2 hours explaining what was wrong and showed me how to prevent it from happening again." Something shifted in Maya's chest. The walls she'd built around her past began to crumble. "My dad," she said simply. "Jackson Washington. He owned Washington Auto and Cycle on Rainier Avenue for 32 years. "Washington Auto," David repeated slowly. "I remember that place. My father used to take our cars there when I was a kid. Said Jack Washington was the only mechanic in Seattle he trusted completely." Maya's head snapped up. "You knew my dad?" "Not well, but yeah. He fixed my first car when I was 16, a beat-up Honda Civic I'd bought with lawn mowing money. He could have charged me anything, taken advantage of a kid who didn't know better. Instead, he spent 2 hours explaining what was wrong and showed me how to prevent it from happening again." Something shifted in Maya's chest. The walls she'd built around her past began to crumble. "He always said the best mechanics are teachers first. That it's not enough to fix what's broken. You have to help people understand why it broke." "Is that why you're so good with Tommy? You learned from him?" Maya nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "Dad saw how I loved engines, how I understood them instinctively. He started teaching me when I was 8. By the time I graduated high school, I could rebuild a transmission blindfolded." Tommy looked up from the spark plug he was still examining. "What happened to the garage?" Maya's smile faded. This was the part of the story that still felt like an open wound. The economy crashed in 2008. People stopped fixing cars. They'd just buy cheap used ones instead. Dad took out loans to keep the business going, convinced things would turn around. They didn't. David set down his wrench, giving her his complete attention. "We lost the garage in 2011. Dad tried to find work at other shops, but he was 63 and everyone wanted younger, cheaper mechanics. The stress, it ate him alive. He had a heart attack 2 years later." "Maya," David's voice was gentle. "I tried to keep working in auto repair, but no shop would take me seriously. A 24-year-old black woman claiming she could rebuild engines? They'd laugh me out before I could prove myself." Maya's voice grew harder. "So I took whatever work I could find. Cleaning houses, washing dishes, stocking shelves, anything to pay rent and student loans I couldn't afford to finish." Tommy had stopped examining the spark plug and was listening with the intense focus he usually reserved for mechanical problems. "But you still know everything," he said matter-of-factly. "The knowledge didn't disappear just because people were stupid." Maya laughed despite her tears. "No, baby, the knowledge is still here." She tapped her temple. "But knowledge without opportunity to use it, sometimes it feels like it might as well be gone." David was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with something Maya couldn't identify. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry the world didn't see what I'm seeing right now. I'm sorry you had to hide who you really are just to survive." Their eyes met across the motorcycle, and Maya saw something in his expression that made her pulse race. Not pity, but recognition, respect, and something deeper that she was afraid to name. "Maya," Tommy's voice broke the tension, "when we get this motorcycle running, will you teach me to ride it?" Both adults laughed, the heavy moment lifting. "Let's focus on making it purr first," Maya said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "But yeah, Tommy, Someday, when you're older and your dad says it's okay, I'll teach you to ride." Tommy beamed and returned to his spark plug examination. But David continued watching Maya with new understanding. "You know," he said quietly, "I think I'm beginning to understand why Tommy connects with you so easily." "Why?" "Because you both know what it's like to be underestimated, to have people see the surface and miss the brilliance underneath." Maya felt something crack open inside her chest, a door she'd kept locked for years. "David," she said softly, testing his name on her tongue, "thank you. Thank you for letting me be myself again, even if it's just for a few hours in your garage." David replied, his voice rougher than usual, "Maya, I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As if summoned by his words, the Harley's engine suddenly turned over with a smooth, powerful rumble. Tommy had been turning the key while they talked, and somehow, miraculously, she had started. All three of them stared at the motorcycle in shock, then at each other, then burst into laughter and cheers. The Harley purred like a kitten, just as Maya had promised, and in that moment, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the sound of a perfectly tuned engine, Maya began to believe that maybe, just maybe, broken things really could be made whole again. The dinner had been perfect. Tommy had chattered excitedly about compression ratios between bites of grilled cheese. David had shared stories about his motorcycle trips with his late wife, and Maya had felt, for 3 precious hours, like she belonged to something beautiful and real. She should have known it couldn't last. Maya was loading the dishwasher when the doorbell rang at 8:47 p.m. Through the kitchen window, she saw the sleek black Mercedes in the driveway, and her stomach dropped. Whoever was here dressed expensively and arrived unannounced. Never a good combination for the help. "I'll get it," David called from the living room, where he and Tommy were reading together. Maya heard the front door open, followed by a woman's voice, crisp, authoritative, and coldly furious. "What the hell is going on here, David?" Maya froze, a plate halfway to the dishwasher rack. "Victoria," David's voice was carefully controlled. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning up your mess, apparently. Do you have any idea what people are saying?" Maya crept closer to the kitchen doorway, her heart hammering. "I don't particularly care what people are saying." "Well, you should." The woman, Victoria, sounded like she was used to being obeyed. "Margaret Blackstone saw your maid's car here until nearly 9 last night. Then today, Sandra Mills drove by and saw all 3 of you in the garage, covered in grease like some kind of family project." The word family came out like profanity. Maya's chest tightened. She knew she should announce herself, go back to her work, maintain the illusion of professional distance. Instead, she stayed hidden, listening to her world crumble. "Victoria, you're overreacting." "Am I?" "David, your net worth is $12 billion. You sit on 4 corporate boards. You're being considered for the International Trade Commission, and you're playing garage mechanic with the help?" Her name is Maya, and she's not the help. She's brilliant, she's kind, and Tommy adores her. Tommy adores chocolate cake for breakfast, but you don't give it to him because you're the adult who understands consequences. This woman is a domestic worker, David. Whatever little fantasy you've constructed here needs to end before it destroys everything you've built. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? I've seen this before. Wealthy widower, vulnerable child, caring employee. It's a cliché, David, and it never ends well for anyone involved. From the living room, Maya heard Tommy's small voice. "Daddy? Why is the lady being mean about Maya?" Maya's heart shattered. Sweet, innocent Tommy, listening to a stranger tear apart the only happiness he'd known in years. "Tommy, go upstairs," David said firmly. "But, now, son." Maya heard Tommy's footsteps on the stairs, slower than usual. He was listening, trying to understand why the adults were upset. "This has gone far enough," Victoria continued. "I've already called the agency. They're sending a replacement tomorrow." "You did what?" "Someone qualified, professional, someone who understands boundaries." The silence that followed was deafening. Maya pressed her back against the kitchen wall, tears streaming down her face. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had known that someone like her didn't belong in David's world. But hearing it laid out so cruelly still felt like being gutted. "Victoria," David's voice was dangerously quiet, "you had no right. I had every right, as your sister, as your business partner, as someone who actually cares about your reputation and your son's future." Victoria's tone softened slightly, becoming almost pleading. "David, think about what you're doing. Think about Tommy. Do you want him growing up confused about social boundaries? Do you want to saddle him with the stigma of having a father who threw away everything for some ridiculous infatuation?" Maya flinched as if she'd been slapped. Ridiculous infatuation. Is that what she was? "This isn't infatuation," David said, but Maya could hear doubt creeping into his voice. "Isn't it? How long have you known this woman, really known her? 3 months, and suddenly she's part of your family?" "David, you're not thinking clearly. The stress of raising Tommy alone, the pressure from work, it's affecting your judgment." "My judgment is fine." "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to throw away a $12 billion empire for a woman who cleans toilets for a living." The cruelty of the words hit Maya like a physical blow. She clutched the kitchen counter, fighting nausea. "Don't," David's voice held a warning. "I'm trying to protect you, both of you. Do you think she actually cares about you, or do you think she sees dollar signs? A woman in her position, suddenly welcomed into the home of one of the wealthiest men in Seattle. Stop. What exactly do you think her endgame is here? Love or financial security she could never achieve on her own?" Maya couldn't listen anymore, couldn't stand there while this woman voiced every insecurity, every self-doubt that had plagued her since she'd started developing feelings for David. She grabbed her keys and purse and headed for the service entrance, but David's voice stopped her cold. "Maya! Maya, wait!" She turned to find him in the kitchen doorway, Victoria close behind him. David's face was stricken, but Victoria looked coldly satisfied. "I was just leaving," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Good evening, Mr. Hartley. Ma'am." The formal address hit David like a slap. "Maya, please don't." "Your sister is right," Maya said quietly. "This was a mistake. All of it." "No, it wasn't. Maya, don't let her—" "Let me what? Tell the truth?" Maya's composure finally cracked. "She's right, David. I do clean toilets for a living. I am a domestic worker. And you are worth $12 billion. What exactly did we think was going to happen here? I thought— You thought what? That we'd play house in your garage forever? That the world would just accept us? That I'd somehow become worthy of your precious social circle? You are worthy. No, I'm not. And deep down, you know it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have let her call that agency. You wouldn't have stood there while she talked about me like I was some kind of gold-digging predator." David's face went pale. You didn't stop her." The words came out like broken glass. "When she said I was just after your money, when she called me the help, when she reduced everything we've shared to a ridiculous infatuation, you didn't say a word." The accusation hung between them, and Maya watched something die in David's eyes as he realized she was right. From upstairs, Tommy's voice called out, "Maya, are you leaving?" Maya closed her eyes, her heart breaking all over again. "Tell Tommy I'm sorry. Tell him the motorcycle lessons were real, even if nothing else was." "Maya, please!" But she was already walking away, leaving behind the smell of motor oil and the echo of laughter and the dangerous dream that she could ever be more than what the world said she was. Behind her, she heard Victoria's satisfied voice. "You'll thank me for this someday, David. Both of you will." Maya made it to her car before the sobs came, harsh and broken, and full of the special kind of pain that comes from having everything you've ever wanted and losing it in the same breath. David stood in his empty garage at 3:17 a.m., staring at the Harley-Davidson that had started this whole beautiful, devastating mess. The motorcycle sat silent now, its chrome dulled in the overhead lighting. On the workbench, Maya's tools were arranged exactly as she'd left them, organized, purposeful, waiting for hands that would never touch them again. Beside the tools lay the photo of his late wife, still smiling beside her own motorcycle, and David could swear Rebecca was looking at him with disappointment. "What would you do?" he whispered to the empty air. "What would you tell me to do?" But he already knew. Rebecca would have taken one look at Victoria's cold calculation and shown her the door. Rebecca would have fought for Maya, for Tommy, for the possibility of love over social expectations. Rebecca would have been brave. David sank onto the workbench stool, his head in his hands. 12 hours ago, he'd been the happiest he'd felt in 5 years. He'd watched his son bloom under Maya's patient guidance, felt his own heart awakening after years of emotional hibernation, believed, stupidly, naively, that love could be enough. Then Victoria had spoken the words that had been haunting him ever since Maya walked out. What exactly do you think her end game is here? The doubt had been instant and poisonous. Was Maya genuine, or had he been played by someone desperate enough to see him as a solution to her financial problems? Was her connection with Tommy real, or was it calculated manipulation? But even as the questions tortured him, David knew the answers. He'd seen Maya's face when Tommy had his meltdown, witnessed her tears when she talked about her father, felt the authenticity in every moment they'd shared. Maya Washington was many things: brilliant, wounded, proud, vulnerable, but she wasn't a liar. Which meant he was a coward. His phone buzzed on the workbench, a text from Victoria. "The new domestic service starts tomorrow at 8 a.m. Professional, discreet, no complications. You'll see this was the right choice." David stared at the message until the screen went dark, his reflection staring back at him like an accusation. Upstairs, a door creaked open. "Daddy?" Tommy stood at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, his hair sticking up at odd angles. Even from a distance, David could see the tear tracks on his son's face. "Hey, buddy, it's late. You should be sleeping." "I can't sleep." Tommy descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. "My brain keeps making the worried sound." David's heart clenched. Tommy's worried sound was how he described anxiety, the internal hum that got louder when his world felt unstable. "Come here." Tommy climbed onto his father's lap, something he usually rarely did anymore, but tonight he needed the comfort. "Is Maya really not coming back?" Tommy's voice was small and broken. "I don't know, son." "Did we do something wrong with the motorcycle?" No, Tommy, you didn't do anything wrong. Neither did Maya." "Then why did the mean lady say those things about her? Why did Maya look so sad?" How could David explain social expectations and class barriers to a 7-year-old? How could he make Tommy understand that sometimes the world decided who was worthy of love based on bank accounts and bloodlines? Sometimes adults make things complicated when they should be simple, David said carefully. "That's stupid." "Yeah, it is stupid." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, then, "Daddy, "Do you love Maya?" The question hit David like lightning. His son, his brilliant, intuitive son, had cut straight through all the doubt and fear to the heart of everything. "Yes," he whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep in his chest. "Yes, I do." "And Maya loves us?" David thought about Maya's patience with Tommy's meltdowns, her tears when she talked about her father, the way she'd looked at both of them like they were precious beyond measure. "Yes, she does." "Then why isn't she here?" Such a simple question, such a devastating answer. "Because I'm a coward," David said quietly. "Because I let fear make my choices instead of love." Tommy looked up at him with those serious eyes, Rebecca's eyes. "So unchoose fear, choose love instead." Out of the mouths of babes. David hugged his son closer, breathing in the scent of shampoo and innocence and brutal honesty. "It might not be that simple, Tommy." "Why not?" "Because I hurt her. I let someone be cruel to her, and I didn't stop it. Maya might not forgive me." "Did you say sorry?" "No." "Did you tell her you love her?" "No." Tommy pulled back to look at his father with 7-year-old exasperation. "Daddy, engines don't fix themselves. You have to do the work." David stared at his son, this amazing little boy who understood hearts as well as he understood carburetors, and felt something shift inside him. Fear loosening his grip, courage taking its place. "You're right," David said softly. "You're absolutely right." He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Maya's contact. His finger hovered over her number for a long moment, then he put the phone away. A text wasn't enough. A phone call wasn't enough. This required showing up. "Tommy, how would you feel about taking a road trip?" "Where?" "To find Maya, to bring her home." Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Can we take the Harley?" David laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd managed since Maya walked out. "I think she'd like that." As father and son headed upstairs to pack, David felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the terrifying, exhilarating certainty that he was about to fight for something worth fighting for. Victoria's voice echoed in his head. "You'll thank me for this someday." But as David looked at his son's hopeful face and thought about Maya's tears and the motorcycle waiting in the garage like a promise, he knew Victoria was wrong. He wouldn't thank her. He'd prove her wrong. And maybe, just maybe, he'd prove himself worthy of the love he'd been too afraid to claim. The rumble of the Harley-Davidson echoed through the narrow streets of Maya's neighborhood at 7:23 a.m., drawing curious stares from early commuters. David had never ridden through this part of Seattle, a world away from his glass towers and manicured lawns, where small houses sat close together and children's bicycles cluttered front porches. Tommy rode behind him, his small arms wrapped tightly around David's waist, both of them wearing the matching leather jackets David had impulsively bought at 6 a.m. from the only motorcycle shop that opened early. "There!" Tommy shouted over the engine noise, pointing to a faded blue Honda Civic parked outside a modest duplex. "That's Maya's car!" David's heart hammered as he pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. This was it, the moment that would either heal what he'd broken or destroy it completely. They climbed off the bike, and David smoothed Tommy's hair, trying to calm his own nerves. "Remember what we talked about, okay? Maya might be hurt. She might need time." "But we brought the apology engine," Tommy said solemnly, patting the Harley's tank. Despite his anxiety, David smiled. Tommy had insisted they needed more than words. They needed to show Maya they understood what mattered to her. The motorcycle was their peace offering, their symbol of everything they'd built together. The front door of the duplex opened before they could knock, and Maya appeared, wearing faded jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. Her eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but when she saw them standing there with Harley, her expression shifted to something David couldn't read. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was carefully neutral. "We came to say sorry," Tommy announced before David could speak, "and to ask you to come home." Maya's composure cracked slightly. "Tommy, sweetie," David stepped forward, his heart in his throat. "I know I don't deserve it, but please, just give me 5 minutes to explain." She looked between them, this billionaire and his son, standing on her doorstep at 7:30 a.m. like knights on a mechanical horse, and something in her expression softened. "5 minutes," she said quietly. They sat on their small front porch, Tommy between them on the steps, the Harley gleaming in the morning sun like a promise. "I was a coward," David began, his voice rough with emotion. "Victoria said exactly what I was afraid to hear, and instead of defending you, instead of defending us, I froze." Maya kept her eyes on her hands, folded carefully in her lap. "Your sister was right about one thing," Maya said quietly. "We are from different worlds. The gap between us is meaningless. David, look at me." Slowly she lifted her eyes to his. "Rebecca, my wife, she grew up in a trailer park in Spokane. Her dad was a construction worker, her mom cleaned office buildings at night. When I brought her home to meet my parents, they were horrified. A Hartley marrying beneath his station? Unthinkable!" Maya's eyes widened. She'd assumed Rebecca came from David's world of privilege and old money. "But Rebecca taught me something my parents never could, that worth isn't measured in dollars or bloodlines. It's measured in kindness, in courage, in the ability to love someone for who they are, not what they have." David's voice grew stronger. "She would have loved you, Maya, and she would have kicked Victoria out of our house for talking to you the way she did." Tommy had been listening intently, and now he spoke up. "Maya, Daddy fired the mean lady." "What?" David almost smiled. "I didn't fire her, she's my sister, but I did tell her she's not welcome in my home or my business until she apologizes to you. I also told the board of directors that if they have a problem with who I choose to love, they can find a new CEO. David, you can't risk your company. My company means nothing without the people I love to share it with." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. "Maya, I love you. Not despite who you are, but because of who you are. You're brilliant, you're kind, you see the best in people when everyone else has given up. You brought my son back to life, and you made me remember what it feels like to be truly alive." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "Both of you. But David, the world you live in will adjust, and if it doesn't, we'll make our own world, one where what matters is how we treat each other, not what we own or where we came from." Tommy had been fidgeting during this adult conversation, and now he couldn't contain himself any longer. "Maya, will you marry my daddy?" Both adults stared at him in shock. "Tommy!" David's face went red. "Well, will you?" Tommy looked at Maya with complete seriousness. "I researched it online. When adults love each other and want to be a family, they get married. Then you could live with us forever and teach me about engines every day and help Daddy not be scared of my autism anymore." Maya laughed through her tears, the first genuine laugh David had heard from her since Victoria's cruel words. "Tommy, that's not really how—" "Actually," David interrupted, his voice suddenly quiet and determined, "maybe it is." He slid off the porch steps and onto one knee on Maya's tiny front lawn, ignoring the neighbors who had started to gather on porches and peer through windows. "Maya Washington," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for a few months, but I also know that you're the missing piece our family has been searching for. Will you marry me?" Maya stared at him in shock. "David, you can't be serious. You don't have a ring? This is—" "Completely insane," David agreed, grinning. "The most insane thing I've ever done. But Tommy's right. When you love someone and want to be a family, you don't wait for the perfect moment. You create it." Tommy jumped up from the steps. "Say yes, Maya. Please say yes." Maya looked at this impossible man kneeling on her lawn, at this beautiful boy who had become the child of her heart, at the motorcycle that had brought them all together. "This is it, the moment we've all been waiting for. What do you think Maya will say? Are you ready for this beautiful ending? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and send prayers for love conquering all obstacles." "This is absolutely crazy," Maya said, wiping tears from her face. "Completely crazy," David agreed. "Your family will disown you. Your business associates will think you've lost your mind. The media will have a field day. Probably. I don't have fancy clothes or the right connections or—" "Maya," David said softly, "you have everything that matters. You have my heart, Tommy's heart, and more courage and grace than anyone I've ever known. Everything else is just noise." Maya looked at Tommy's hopeful face, at David's vulnerable expression, at the motorcycle gleaming in the morning sun like a symbol of everything broken made whole again. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes," Tommy shrieked, jumping up and down. "We're going to be a real family!" David swept Maya into his arms, spinning her around while their neighbors cheered and applauded. When he set her down, she was laughing and crying at the same time. "I can't believe you rode a motorcycle to propose to me." "It seemed appropriate," David grinned. "After all, she's the one who brought us together." Tommy threw his arms around both of them, and for a moment they just held each other, this unlikely family forged from broken parts and made whole by love. "So," David said eventually, "ready to come home and start our real life together?" Maya looked at her small duplex, then at the man and boy who had become her world, and then the motorcycle waiting to carry them toward their future. "Actually, I think I'd like to drive." And as Maya fired up the Harley with David and Tommy holding tight behind her, the engine purred exactly like she'd promised. Powerful, beautiful, and ready for whatever road lay ahead. 3 months later, Maya Washington Hartley stood in the garage of her new home, teaching her husband and son how to rebuild a 1969 Triumph Bonneville they'd found in a barn in Oregon. On the workbench, Rebecca's photo smiled down at them, and Maya could swear she felt the other woman's approval. Tommy, now 8 and thriving, had his own toolbox and could diagnose engine problems with the precision of a master mechanic. David had discovered he had a natural talent for electrical systems and had started a non-profit program providing motorcycle repair training to underemployed youth. And Maya was exactly where she belonged, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the sound of laughter, teaching the people she loved that broken things really could be made whole again. Sometimes the best families weren't born, they were built, one careful piece at a time, by hands that refused to give up on love. The end.